Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. Along with Mira and Anya, I'm José, and I want to present you our latest work that is called Ghosts on the Road, a conceptual approach to mapping ghost bikes in Montreal. Before we start, it's important to acknowledge that a ghost bike it's a memorial that honors cyclists who died in Montreal in the public space. And the outline of this small presentation is, first, I will explain the theoretical framework of this work, but also of all of the work that we as a group imagine and accomplish. Anya is going to explain the rationale of this work, and lastly, Mira is going to explain the map. So, the theoretical framework is this. First of all, we believe in tell stories with our maps, and therefore, a narrative map is, in our conception, is a spatial understanding of a really intimate event. For us, we want to map memories and emotions with maps. For us, we are part of this spatial turn in humanities, where maps are not just scientific artifacts like GIS and remote sensing products. We use humanities, arts, and multimedia to craft our maps. We believe that they are holders of memories and stories, like you can see in the work of, for example, Tolkien or Martin, or in the explorers or conquerors maps that they put small notes in the sides of every cartography project. Also, we are not aiming to mirror reality with our maps. We want to articulate spatial stories. And one of our motto as a group is that maps are never finished. They are always in the process of becoming. And Anya is going to explain to you the rationale of this concrete project.
Okay, so why apply a narrative mapping approach to the ghost bike movement? Well, a map does exist. This was made by the Montreal Gazette newspaper, and as you can see on the far side, you have the names listed of all the people that have died that have the ghost bike memorials for them. And then the locations are placed on the map. And now we think that this is a relatively generic and to some degree superficial kind of spatial representation of these really tragic and important events for the city and for the families and friends of those who have died. So we would like to to use narrative mapping to be able to represent these events spatially, but also in a deeper and more meaningful way. We want to memorialize these people beyond their deaths, and including their deaths. So what we've done is we've contacted Gabrielle Anctil, who's the organizer of the Ghost Bike movement in Montreal. She's given us sort of a preliminary permission to speak with families and has told us that many families would be very much interested in speaking with us. And what we'd like to do is gather stories about the people who have died, both as people and as cyclists, including maybe routes they used to take on a daily basis, their favorite coffee shops or restaurants. And we want to include that text and visually in the map. The other reason we think that narrative mapping is both an appropriate and very important choice for the ghost bike movement is its capacity to contribute to real change in terms of bicycle safety in Montreal. When we spoke to Gabrielle, she was telling us that the movement, at least here, is really trying to move towards prevention rather than reaction, because this is a movement that only really gains any kind of traction when somebody dies, and they'd like to change that. So what we're interested in doing, as well as gathering stories of those who have died, is to look at the, first of all, locations where they died and the infrastructural issues that caused their deaths. There's a big problem with very dangerous trucks on the road in Montreal that have been banned in other cities. Here we haven't banned them yet. So it includes that, but also talking to other cyclists to find out what are other dangerous locations in Montreal, and we'd like to map those so that this would be both a sort of memorial map, but also an awareness map to show people these are dangerous spots. You know, be careful if you're cycling here, and for drivers, be careful if you're driving here. Speaking of that, Gabrielle also highlighted for us that one of the movements they'd like to, or one of the directions they'd like to go in is to create bonds between cyclists, drivers, and pedestrians, because there's often a lot of animosity between particularly drivers and cyclists. And she said this, I don't feel this way, this doesn't need to exist. So another sort of layer or dimension to this map would be to speak also to drivers and pedestrians who have been impacted by these deaths. Some people have come forward as witnesses to the events that said they were really traumatized by them. So we'd like to also gather stories from those people in order to have this map be sort of a map of awareness and to create empathy and sort of a united front against these senseless deaths. And so we come to the question of what would this map really look like? And Mira is going to explain that to you right now.
So in an effort to create a map that best reflects our approach of triggering emotions and telling stories, our map will focus on two main aspects. So first, to have expressive elements, and second, to have overlap layers that tell these stories. So first, we started with very basic things, like the color of the map. So we chose the purple color, which creates a mix of emotions of melancholy and mystery, but also of thoughtfulness and spirituality. And then we put the ghost bike icon, which is the icon of the movement, and behind it a background of a truck, which was a common cause in all death incidents. And to create a map, or to create a story out of the ghost bike movement, we will be having several layers, the first one being the ghost line, which is the line that maps the different death incidents, and along which each flower represents the ghost bike location. We're also mapping the everyday routes that the cyclists used to take and their usual stops along the way. So we're planning to highlight sections of the interviews we're going to do with the families to sort of have more personal or intimate facts on the map, like her favorite coffee shop where he used to stop here for his coffee every morning. So some really very daily aspects that will make us connect and relate to. And as these incidents do not only affect the families and the relatives of the cyclists, we are also including stories and emotions of people who witnessed the accident and who were affected by it. So we're going to include the routes that they did that day along with their stories and emotions. So finally, as Anya mentioned before, the most important aspect of our map is really its implications. So first we want to memorialize the cyclists by telling the story of who they are, and so we do not only want to focus on their deaths, but really on their story as normal human beings like we are. So when we click on the flower, we will have their story shown. And the second implication is to prevent rather than to react. So in our map, we're going to provide an analysis of the site where the death accident happened. So this will begin by very general problems and common problems like dangerous trucks on the road or no safe bike lanes or cars that do not stop on the stoplight, to more site-specific problems like underpasses problems or even road design. So where are we going with our project now? Currently, we are in conversation with the organizers of the Ghost Bike movements to put us in contact with the families and the witnesses to gather visual material to include on the map. And for us, it's really important to work ethically with these families because they were hugely affected. So we're keeping in mind that really cycling and biking is not just a morning sport for them, but it's really like a mode of transportation and a way of life. Thank you.